Hi, I'm Lincoln Anderson. I'm a designer at 352. 352 is a website development firm, and a couple years ago, we decided to make this dramatic shift in our culture towards being more agile. And agile is kind of a buzzword in our industry. It represents a lot of values and methodologies around how we organize and how we work together and how we build projects. And it has a pretty good history in more technical firms, software engineering firms, but as designers, we wondered, how is this going to affect us? Is it going to make us better designers? Is it appropriate for us? Are we going to encounter certain types of challenges? And we found that, yes, all of the above. But it's been really good for us over the past couple of years. And we picked up a lot of lessons that have helped us become better designers. So I want to share some of those lessons with you today. And hopefully next time you design a project, these will help you. So the first lesson we learned was that we prefer cross-functional teams over silos. Silos are this concept, it's pretty common in our industry, where you take all the people that have a particular skill set, like all the creative people, and you put them on one side of the building, and you put all the programmers on the other side of the building. And it's kind of weird if you think about it. What we've discovered is that if you take all those people and you mix them up, you know, all the people that you know you're going to need for a project. You're going to need a couple designers, a couple programmers, maybe a marketing specialist or a QA guy, quality assurance, and you put them on a team and you say, you guys work on this project from beginning to end, whatever you need to do. It's a lot better. It's a lot more fun. You learn from each other. There's a lot more stuff that doesn't slip through the cracks. And as a designer, it's a lot more satisfying because you can be designing something, you can spin your chair around and say to a programmer, hey, this thing I'm designing, I know it looks cool, but is it going to work? Is there any technical problems that you see down the line? And they can help you be a better designer. They learn about the creative process. And it's just a lot more satisfying, a lot more fun to be on a cross-functional team as opposed to being isolated. The next lesson that we learned is that we prefer collaboration over these big reveals. So there are always times when a designer needs to isolate themselves and polish a design and kind of flesh out the details of it before sharing it with the rest of the team. You know, you need to get your idea down on paper or on the screen in order for people to really understand what you're thinking. But the danger can be when you are isolating yourself for too long. You're working on something for hours or days or weeks, and you're not sharing it with anyone else. You don't have anyone telling you whether you're on the right track or not. And so you end up in this situation right here where you're pulling back the curtain and you're saying, check out my masterpiece, and you missed the mark. Maybe you like it, but just no one else really likes it, or some details that the client gave you on the first day have changed since you started working on the project. So it's really key that you're always collaborating. We have stand-up meetings with our clients every day, and it gives us a chance to give a little update of what we're working on, ask some questions, and make sure that we're on the right track. So that's really key. The next lesson that we learned was that we prefer flexibility and future growth over locking down a design. So if you're a designer, you've experienced designing something and you love it, you get to a point where the client loves it, everyone on the team is excited, this design looks great. And then a couple weeks later, someone comes back and says, hey, we need to make a change. And it's really frustrating to you. As you can imagine, you thought you were done with this thing, and now it's back to the drawing board. I need to make changes. And so there's this temptation to lock down the design and say, my design process, you know, after everyone's happy with it, we're going to lock it down. I'm going to lay down the law. You can't make any changes after this date and make a big deal out of it. But the reality is that in life, things change, and you need to be prepared for that. You know, if you are working with a client who is inquisitive and they're researching their users and they're finding out more about how their industry works, they're going to have changes. They're going to say, hey, I was wrong about something I told you last week. I've learned more. And the design and the product would really be better if we did it differently. So you need to be prepared to adapt to that change. Also, you know, think about once you launch that design and the website is alive and people are using it. If you did a good job, there's going to be more and more people using that site, and more features are going to need to be added to it, more content. So that thing is going to need to grow. So we try to set ourselves up so that change is not so painful. There's a couple ways to do that. One is to when you're like wireframing out the site and you're designing where the menu is going to go, what type of menu it's going to be, think about down the line how that might change. Sure, there's only 3 menu items right now because you're in like the first week of development, but what about down the line when there might need to be like 15 items? Does your menu expand? Does it account for those types of changes? programmers are really good at identifying these types of opportunities because that's kind of how they think already. You know, they're always looking at their logic and thinking, what if the user does something crazy? I need to account for something that I didn't necessarily predict in the moment. So they'll really help you out in finding out where you need to account for that flexibility. The other thing that you can really take advantage of are modern tools. The hot one right now is CSS preprocessors like less and sass and stylus. You can look up those terms if you don't know what they are, but those are really going to help you once you get into development to make changes on the fly to colors and rounded corners and things like that that would normally be a really big pain to have to go back in and change across your site. You can make a sweeping change in just a few seconds, so check those out. The last lesson that I want to talk about is really specific to Scrum. Scrum is a framework that will help you get your organization or your team off the ground in an agile way without having to kind of think of a lot of rules right off the bat. You can kind of follow these rules that Scrum sets for you, and then you can kind of tweak it as you go and adjust it to how your team needs to work. But one of the things that's really core to Scrum is this concept of a backlog. And if you've never heard of this term before, you can think of it like a big list of all the things that need to be built on your website. But instead of it being like a task list or like a feature specification list, it's more like a set of user stories. User stories is what they're called. And these are just what they sound like. They're little stories about how the user is going to interact with the product. So instead of having a list that says, build a product catalog, you might have stories like the user wants to find a product by name, or they want to search for a product by color. Then you talk a little bit about their motivation. They want to search by color because they're shopping for a friend, and they don't know exactly what the friend wants, but they know they like the color red or something like that. So you get started thinking about not just this thing that you're building, but why you're building it. And this really resonates with designers because we like designing for people. We like designing user experiences, UX. And the backlog helps everyone on the team and the client get on that same page of thinking about how the user is going to use the product instead of just making this big jumbled pile of things you need to build and then just cranking through it. So these are some of the lessons that we've learned about how to do agile design. And I hope you learned a thing or two, and thanks for watching.